Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus. I'm your host Sree Iyer, and today I have with me Sridhar Chityala ji, and we are going to have a very short but pointed and focused conversation on Biden's new strategic ambiguity, what it means, and how it affects the world, and how it affects some of the partners of United States, and what are the differences between what he's trying to do now and what Trump was doing before this. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest for today, Sridhar Chityala ji. Sridhar ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel, sir.
Namaskar, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and looking forward to this short, sweet, brief session on this formally stated strategic ambiguity as a policy, which Nicholas Burns, the incoming ambassador to China, phrased it with regard to policies around Taiwan. So I think that's the subject matter of discussion today, and we'll probably briefly touch on what's the context and why. What is the difference between the approach of Trump versus Biden?
So prior to Biden coming along, a lot of fronts were quiet. North Korea, Iran, the Middle East. For example, the United States was able to set its consulate in Jerusalem, something that was thought unthinkable. And not only that, the United States brokered a peace accord between UAE and Israel, resulting in diplomatic relations being established for the first time between a Middle East country and Israel. And then many other countries followed suit. So in some of the foreign exchange policies, Trump was very successful. And it seems like Biden seems to have suddenly run into a lot of headwind. And Sridharji, this strategic and ambiguity, is it something that is inevitable for the United States, that is forced upon it, or is it something that US is willingly trying to adapt?
Well, I think that we need to look at the strategic ambiguity as a framework as it relates to China, more with respect to Taiwan. And then we need to look at the Biden foreign policy as it relates to several other countries where this ambiguity continues to pervade. I think the Biden administration is telling us that they are not in confrontational approach. Their approach is one of continued negotiation and continue to use the diplomatic framework as a means and mechanism to resolve issues. We all know leading up to Trump, presidency, there were a lot of issues that you laid out that were simmering around the world, be it China in South China Sea, be it China as it relates to Taiwan, be it China as it relates to India, be it China as it relates to trade policies and interferences, be it Russia as it relates to United States and policies in Ukraine. And then you have North Korea, Iran, etc. All this, what you call flashpoints in the world. So there has been a dichotomous change between President Trump versus the past administrations, and we seem to be getting back to the same scenario under Biden.
So moving forward, this is fraught with risk because the United States population, America, is not happy with China because the questions about the origin of the COVID virus, which continues to cast its shadow on the country, will only make people demand answers. But for some reason unexplainable, the Biden administration is waffling on that. A report that was supposed to clearly show the origin of the COVID virus from the Wuhan laboratories is now, has 2 or 3 theories. It's just kind of muddied and muddled. And it's not directly pointing fingers at China when the whole world knows that the origin was from there. There is no other explanation for it. So, Sridharji, with this strategic ambiguity, what does the United States hope to achieve?
Well, I think that you frame an interesting context around what is the outcome that is expected out of this ambiguity approach, which probably will scale from the policy towards Taiwan towards the other issues. For example, I think you touched on COVID-19. Any attempt to draw investigations into COVID-19 has been dismissed, or we had some reports floating around from two different agencies, one contradicting the other, stating that there was no clinching or conclusive evidence that takes it to China. So that put that issue from ambiguity to no further investigation. Then you take the case of the interference in United States elections. That was strongly contested by the Biden administration and the Democratic Party. That has effectively been put to rest. So then you take the case of the policy issues as it relates to Iran with regard to the nuclear options and the nuclear development and non-compliance with the 2015 sanctions and restrictions placed on it. Again, when Mr. Naftali Bennett visited United States, confrontation was not the approach. If Iran doesn't comply, we will think of an alternate policy. We don't know what the alternate policy is. So you had that issue. Then you have Iran continuing to negate any attempt to move forward with the sanctions that were imposed and basically setting preconditions. Now, the latest on that is that they would want to be talking to the Big Six in end of November. So you have the ambiguity continuing. So what they're saying, what the Biden administration is saying, there's no adversarial action that has emanated as a result of this ambiguous and ambivalent approach, because China is always guessing what the specific moves that US may choose to make or may choose not to make. That seems to have been the approach. As it relates to Taiwan, which is where this comes from, and this was reaffirmed by, as I mentioned, Nicholas Burns, what they're saying is that, look, we will support Taiwan and in the event of any Chinese attack. But that statement is not ironclad, right? So it is conceivable that whether actually United States turns up on the day remains a big question mark. Now, in the mind of the Chinese, they feel that, hey, we don't know whether they're going to come or they're not going to come. So we will continue to make saber rattling and continue to make incursions into Taiwan and see how this kind of maps out. So therefore, this ambivalence is what is keeping the world under fuzz and turmoil. The same thing as it relates to North Korea. There's also, there's all kinds of things that the North Koreans have done, the North Korean president has done. There has not been an effective response and allowing him to get away with whatever he was doing. Now, just to touch on 1 minute on Trump. Trump was quite explicit. Whosoever tried to raise a hand of confrontation, he responded with specific actions. Let's take India. Mike Pompeo went to India and said, we see Chinese presence in the Indian borders. We're not going to keep quiet. We are going to support India in its effort to endeavors to support the sovereignty. Then, with regard to Taiwan, we made it explicit. They made it very explicit that they are reopening the direct diplomatic negotiations between the US State Department officials, servicemen, and other representatives, which has not occurred until that point of time, basically running the ire. It was again the Trump administration which called it as the China virus as opposed to calling it COVID. So they have been very explicit in making the statements and making China feel the impact of its aggressive posturing and policies. The same, Quad was amplified and Quad became a deterrent mechanism in terms of very specific actions that Trump and his team followed through relative to what we are seeing in Biden. That's the fundamental difference between Biden and the people prior to them.
So if we have to summarize the approach, one is strategic ambiguity, the other is assertive deterrence.
assertive deterrence. Yes.
So this is very, very interesting that you have now an administration which could have built on that and made the United States even more stronger militarily as well as as an economically, and somehow this administration has let that opportunity go waste. As a matter of fact, a lot of other things have happened. We'll not go into that. Sridharji, your last thoughts on where do you think this is going to end? Is it going to be like, oh, I'll give you another example. Since August, after the fall of Kabul, the US has been much more aggressive in its policy towards China, or so it appears to me. I could be wrong about this. Is there a rethink on part of the Biden administration vis-a-vis China? And if so, would that lead to somewhat of a censure of China in the near future?
Well, they have been saying that the whole attention in the world has all the efforts that United States has historically placed as a strategic priority, be it Russia, be it Africa, be it Iran, be it the Sahel region, be it the Three Eyes as we call it. United States had a very strategic footprint in terms of what it wanted to do by way of preservation of the interests and keeping the bad boys away. As far as Biden is concerned, there is no clarity. They said we are pulling back on all of these efforts, be it Iraq, be it from northern Syria, be it from Afghanistan, stating explicitly that their whole approach is towards China. But there is nothing that is in clear terms. What exactly are the actions? Are they amplifying Quad? Are they going to be specifically focusing around, we'll touch on this separately, on Japan, to strengthen Japan? What are they going to do between Japan and Korea and United States as it relates to the North Korean belligerents? So there is no clarity that is coming from Biden administration, except for some rhetoric, which is effectively to state, hey, we will be responsive. I think the clarity is coming more from Nicholas Burns, who is a career diplomat, which explicitly states that the ambiguity has worked, so we will not be doing anything further. We will allow this to run. And Mike Pompeo calls it China appeasement policy. I think that is what we're going to see as we continue on this path of this new approach of Biden. Even Afghanistan was a disaster. What have they done? Nothing.
And we will wait and see, and we'll perhaps revisit this topic in the near future. Sridharji, thank you very much, and namaskar.
Thank you. Namaskar. Have a good day.